They weren't knights. They weren't soldiers on a king's payroll. For 3 centuries, the most feared riders in Britain came from a 70-mile strip of hill country where the law barely reached. When people on both sides of the line heard hooves at midnight, they didn't ask, "Who's there?" They asked, "Which clan?" Armstrong, Elliot, Nixon, Graham, Scott. If your cattle were out, they were gone. If your front door was shut, it wasn't for long. This is why the Anglo-Scottish Border produced the most dangerous men in British history, and why almost everything about them makes sense once you see the system that created them. If you want more hard evidence British history like this, subscribe now. New deep dives every week. Start with the terrain. The border is a seam of rolling moor, bog, and broken hills from the Solway Firth to the North Sea. It's poor arable land, good pasture, and a maze of fast routes for light horse. In the late medieval and Tudor-Stuart period, it was war-edge country. English and Scottish crowns fought often, 1296 to 1550s, then signed truces that rarely lasted. Every time armies marched, farms were torched, men were pressed, cattle were lifted. A stable tax base never formed. So people built a different economy, fast violence for fast profit. Local government wasn't modern policing, it was the march system. Both kingdoms divided the frontier into east, middle, and west marches, each run by a warden appointed by the crown. In theory, wardens kept order. In practice, most were leading border lairds, kin to the very riders they were meant to restrain. When your nephew is the best man at a raid-like-lightning vanish-by-dawn job, you don't rush to hang him. The law that mattered was the laws of the marches, a binational code that recognized reiving, cattle theft, blackmail, rescue, hot trod pursuit, and tried to manage it with timed truces, hostage-taking, and redress days. It didn't stop raiding, it regularized it. The men themselves, border Reivers, weren't a single tribe. They were interlocking surnames: Armstrongs, Grahams, Elliots, Bells, Nixons, Rutherfords, Robsons, Fenwicks, Forsters, Kerrs, Scotts, living in kin groups that could mobilize 20 to 200 riders in an evening. They slept in bastle houses, 2-story stone farm forts, cattle below behind barred doors, family above with a ladder you pulled up at night. Watch hearths burned low, spears and hackbuts rested within arm's reach. If a beacon lit on a ridge, you could be mounted in minutes. Why so dangerous? Because the Reivers optimized 4 things the rest of Britain didn't: mobility, intelligence, immunity, and timing. Mobility, distinctive Galloway nags, small, tough horses, could do 40-50 miles overnight over ground that would break a destrier. A typical day foray lifted 200 head of cattle and was home before dawn. Intelligence, reiving needed maps in the head. Scouts and prickers knew every forded burn and every hill shadow where hooves made no sound. They also ran human networks. A servant in your target's byre might be a cousin to the men coming for your kai. Immunity, deadly feud bound kin to retaliate. Kill a Nixon, expect Nixons for 20 winners. Feud wasn't chaos, it was a ledger. If a warden hanged one Armstrong, he might quietly return 2 stolen herds later to balance the books. Timing, the calendar mattered. Winter grazing pushed cattle down into valleys. Long nights gave cover. Raids bunched around fairs, Lammas, Martinmas, when stock and rents came in. On truce days, weapons were technically banned. The best riders came anyway and counted fences. There was a code. Hot trod allowed immediate armed cross-border pursuit with a burning peat on a spear to show you were on lawful chase. Cold trod required legal warrant. Blackmail, originally black rent, protection money and black coin, could buy you immunity from specific surnames for a season. A size of march treason made it capital to shelter a known reiver. Plenty of wardens did anyway. Oath-taking had teeth. If your man failed to appear for redress, you, his chief, could be fastened with iron to the castle wall until he did, or until you paid. Crown policy made them worse before it made them disappear. In the 1540s, Henry VIII tried rough wooing to force a marriage alliance with Scotland. English chevauchés, burning raids, gutted Liddesdale and Teviotdale. Scots retaliated into Tynedale and Redesdale. When peace flickered, reivers pivoted to whoever paid. Many served as light cavalry for both crowns, or for France in the Auld Alliance. A hard man from Buccleuch might lift your cattle in January, then ride as your scout in July, if your gold said so. The weapon set was tuned to the job. Short lances and Jedburgh staves in the squeeze, steel jacks and light mail against arrows, daggs, pistols, and hackbuts, short muskets, for shock at gates. Many carried a distinctive border sword, basket-hilted predecessors to later broadswords. No heavy armor, no banners in the wind. A reiving party was all dark wool, low talk, and wet leather. Fame and fear fed each other. Ballads and court records give us names and knights. Jock of the Side, Hobby Noble, Kinmont Willie, Armstrong, broken out of Carlisle Castle in 1586 by Scott of Buccleuch in a commando raid that humiliated the English warden and nearly triggered war. Sir Walter Scott later romanticized them. The state had called them felons when it could catch them. Parish books simply recorded the results. Byers Brent, 5 kye taken away. Were they uniquely violent? Compared to London cutpurses or West Country smugglers? Yes, for 2 reasons. First, the frontier normalized retaliation and taught generations that honor equaled fast rescue. Second, both crowns tolerated paramilitary banditry when it served strategic aims, then condemned it when it did not. A man raised by that logic becomes the sharpest tool in any kit and the hardest to put down. So why did it end abruptly? Because politics rewired the map. In 1603, James VI of Scotland also became James I of England. With one king on both thrones, the border stopped being an international frontier and became an internal security problem. James renamed it the Middle Shires, abolished the march wardens, and criminalized the march law that had protected reiving. He launched coordinated pacification, garrisons at Carlisle, Berwick, and Key Towers, summary courts, mass deportations of notorious surnames to Ulster, plantation service, the Low Countries, mercenary regiments, and the English colonies' indenture. Leading Armstrongs, Grahams, and Elliots were hanged, transported, or pressed. Bastle houses were slighted. Beacon Hills went dark. Within a decade, the steel bonnets that had terrorized 2 kingdoms were either dead, farming quietly, or fighting for hire in other people's wars. You see border names in the 30 Years' War, and later among Ulster Scots, who crossed to the American backcountry. Danger didn't vanish, it moved. The same kin networks, horsemanship, and hardscrabble ethos reappeared wherever frontier logic returned: Ulster's marches, the Scottish-Irish colonies in Appalachia, the irregular cavalry of later civil wars. When historians call the Reivers the most dangerous men in British history, they don't mean highest body count. They mean most highly adapted to sustained, deniable violence inside a Christian literate state system that couldn't quite decide if it wanted them or wanted them gone. What's left on the ground today isn't just museum glass. Drive the A7 and you pass tower houses, Hermitage, Gilnockie, Smailholm, stone exclamation marks that once anchored whole valleys. In hamlets, you still find bastle shells with cattle door arches bricked in. Parish registers and court books in Carlisle, Hexham, Howick, Jedburgh, and Newcastle list days of truce, assizes, pledges for good behavior, and entries like John Nixon executed for March treason. Place names whisper the old grammar: Watchno, Reed Syke, Pellgate. Even language kept souvenirs: blackmail from black rent, bereave from reeve. Were they criminals or soldiers? Wrong question. They were a workforce produced by a frontier that paid in cattle, honor, and survival. In a world without standing police, they were the fastest response force available. Yours if you'd paid the black rent, your terror if you hadn't. They were also fathers, tenants, and often tenants of kings who privately needed them. The same man who lifted your herd on Monday might ride in your warden's retinue on Friday. The border made that double life normal. If this kind of evidence-led history hits the spot, subscribe and turn on notifications. Next up is a viewer case study traced from a truce day roll to a bastle doorstep. If you want the pattern, follow 5 constants. Geography builds the tool. Poor, arable, rich pasture, tight valleys, and quick ridges breed light horse, not castles and lances, chivalry. Law shapes behavior. March law didn't end reiving, it priced it. Where the state can't monopolize force, it meters it. Kin is currency. In feud economies, your surname is a security guarantee and a target. It multiplies both risk and rescue. Crowns are inconsistent. Frontier monarchies reward irregulars in war and punish them in peace. Smart irregulars learn to pivot early. Integration ends the game. Union removed the international frontier and replaced ambiguous march rules with central courts, garrisons, and transportation. The ecology that bred Reivers collapsed. Everything here is traceable in records: warden's rolls, truce day lists, indictments for day foray and night foray, demolition orders for towers, transportation warrants for Grahams to Ireland, and parish notes of men banished the Middle Shires. Archaeology matches the paper. Bastles built thick around 1570 to 1600, many slighted after 1603. Horse gear, pistol parts, and jackplates found in farm debris rather than in knightly ruins. Ballads aren't sources in themselves, but were they name places and outcomes? The court books often confirm the bones of the story. So were they the most dangerous men in British history? And the one metric that mattered on that strip of land, ability to project organized, deniable violence at speed over broken ground? Yes, they made kings sign with one hand and guard the stables with the other. They taught 2 countries that borders don't need customs houses to be real. They need men on small horses who know the dark between beacons. Next, we'll put 2 real case studies side by side. One Armstrong line out of Liddesdale with court entries for night foray, and a later transportation order to Ulster. One Tynedale farming line that paid black rent and left the receipts in the parish chest. We'll show you how to follow the paper trail yourself. Subscribe to join that investigation and drop your border surnames in the comments so we can pick a few for a viewer deep dive.